Welcome to the Iferia TechCast, where we bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today we are joined by Lee Anderson, a cybersecurity professional who has spent 16 years watching traditional security training fail, not because people didn't care, but because stress, distraction, and blame were working against everything they'd learned. By applying insights from game design and mindfulness to the human side of digital security, he developed a different approach, one that treats people as whole humans rather than potential threats, building safer behavior through design instead of punishment. Lee, I am excited to welcome you to the show today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. So let's get things started. Let's start at the beginning. You've spent 16 years focused on the human side of cybersecurity. Could you tell us about the journey? How did you end up in this specific niche? Was there a moment when you realized that teaching people what not to click wasn't actually changing anything?
Yeah, thank you. So I started off with a degree in information systems and technology and took a couple classes in cybersecurity and really fell in love with the topic. And as I eventually made my way there, I found that there was a lot of cybersecurity people can be a little negative towards why people click. They'll blame them as being the weakest link in security. And it always felt wrong to me. And I think the more and more that I was exposed to it, I realized and I was learning that when people click, they're not clicking because they want to do something wrong. A lot of times it's there are things in their environment that make it difficult for them to behave in an ideal way, whether they're stressed or tired or distracted, and blaming them was counterproductive because it would often have a negative impact on the company because those employees would then have resentment towards their boss or manager because they were being punished for something that they didn't really have control over directly. So seeing that just made me want to really focus on what can I do to enable people to do better as opposed to just slapping their wrists and telling them to do so.
Right, Lee. So you talk about traditional security awareness training failing because it ignores how people actually behave under stress. So what does that failure look like on the ground? If an employee who has just been phished, what was probably happening in their brain and their body at that moment?
Sure. So yeah, when an attacker crafts a phishing email, they want to provoke certain emotional responses from the end user. So they want to get them curious, or maybe they want to get them scared. And so what happens is that fires the emotional center of the brain, which is quicker to act than our logical, the prefrontal cortex. So when the emotional trigger goes, your body goes into fight or flight mode and you start acting oftentimes in an illogical way because your brain is either scared or it's trying to meet those emotional demands. And that's what the attackers are going for. And so have if we don't make space between that emotional reaction and our actual physical actions, or clicking on a link or giving our credentials or whatnot, if we don't have that space, we're likely going to slip into what the attacker is wanting from us. And that's that illogical response.
Okay, so Lee, you use game design and mindfulness as tools. So for someone who hears mindfulness and thinks it's soft or unrelated to security, so how do you connect those dots? What's actually happening neurologically when a mindful person encounters a scam versus a stressed out or distracted one?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks. And yeah, it can often get us thinking of somebody sitting cross-legged, chanting or whatever with the mindfulness. But in reality, as I was talking about that space between when an attacker tries to get you to do something based on what they wrote in a phishing email or what they're telling you over the phone. Mindfulness is that ability to recognize when our emotions are flaring up. So when that emotional response kicks in, we're able to recognize it and not immediately engage it. Now that response exists for a reason. It's kept us alive over thousands of years as humans to be able to flee from danger and to preserve our life. But in the instance of an email, the emergency is less real. And so that mindfulness is what helps us to recognize a scam for what it is and to be skeptical. Humans can be naturally skeptical. And if we can give ourselves space to do that, that's helpful. And the game based mechanics or the game based design in all of this is creating an environment that's safe to fail. So if we can recognize that there are technological controls in place that are going to be preventing a lot of the bad stuff from happening on somebody's computer. So if they click a link, we often have antivirus and other things in play that are supposed to support the users. So if we can emphasize to end users that our company is doing the best they can to secure their environment technologically and to let them know that they believe in them and they trust them, they know that they want them to report suspicious emails or suspicious activity. If they can instill that safe environment to fail, which is it is an element of game design, that can engender a lot more trust in their employees for their employer.
All right, Lee, that was a truly insightful response. So you talk about designing systems that are safe to fail. So what does that mean in practice, and how do you create an environment where people can make mistakes without catastrophic consequences while still maintaining security?
Yes, and that's a very good question and one that's hard for some people to understand. If somebody is clicking on the phishing simulations time after time, they're they are a risk to the organization if you're only looking at the clicks. But are you also looking at their work environment? It could be as simple as, do they have an ergonomically a comfortable desk to work at? Or are they uncomfortable, which is causing them to feel stress or maybe aches in their body, or maybe the sun is coming in from a window? So making it safe to safe to fail is letting the employees know that the business has their back, that the business is there to support them because they trust them. They're going to give them training to recognize cues in emails or to how to respond when somebody's trying to get information from them. But they aren't going to threaten them with disciplinary action if they make a mistake. And so that's where it judges. If you're just looking at whether or not somebody clicks a phishing simulation and you're not going deeper, in my mind, that's not creating a safe environment to fail, and it's not showing that you have a real interest in the employees themselves.
So, Lee, you challenge punitive security cultures, the ones that blame and shame people for falling for attacks. So, why do fear-based approaches actually increase risk? What's the psychology there?
Yeah, so it is interesting because in the short term, fear-based tactics do work. They do get people to do what you want them to do, but it's because they're scared. And so they're going to be more paranoid. It's going to increase stress in their work. And it's also going to give them a bad taste in their mouth for the security program at at the place of work. And if employees don't have a positive view of security, they're less likely to embrace the things that are being taught there. They'll only embrace it because they're afraid to not do it. Whereas if it can be done in a kind, a supportive way, that's going to engender a lot more trust and support, and they're going to buy in to these new training programs and whatnot because they know that the company is there to help them succeed and not there to watch for them to fail. And so again, just that fear helps in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to create resentment and lower productivity and loyalty from the employees.
All right, all right. So, you also said it's a mistake to separate employees' personal digital lives from their workplace security behavior. So why is that separation harmful? And what happens when you treat people as whole humans instead of just employees who might click bad things?
Yeah, I think that's really important and often an oversight, I think, because the business is concerned about what's happening during the work when the employee's at work. And if again, kind of to show the support to the employee, if, for example, an employer offers the employees training on how to help teach their any elderly relatives, grandparents, how to be safer online to avoid scams, or maybe how to teach their children how to be safe online. If an employee takes a step further and shows some interest in helping protect the employee in their personal life, that secure mindset that they're going to be able to adopt and enact in their personal life is going to bubble up, and it's going to show up at work. And so when an employer shows that interest and that care for the employee beyond just the time that they're working there, it's going to allow the employee to show up more fully, more present, more loyal, and in the end, more productive and increase the security overall. Okay.
Right. So you use game-based learning and simulation. So can you walk us through designing a game that teaches security instincts rather than just compliance? And also, what makes a game stick in a way that a training module might actually not be able to?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, so over the last year, I've spent a lot of time with game design and specifically around the subject of educating people on how to be more secure. And I started with that, again, that whole human perspective and recognizing that the way that our brain responds to threats is something that needs to be paid attention to in order to have to be more successful against cyber attacks. And so I just finished designing a game. It's called Hack Attack Defense, and in it, what I have is the players will draft certain defenses, whether it's password managers or secure Wi-Fi, and they use those to help defend against cyber attacks that pop up randomly throughout the game. And the key card in this game is called a reality check. And that's kind of that mindfulness, that pause, take a break, take a moment. And that card can be used essentially kind of like a while to help prevent those bad attacks from happening. So again, it's a fun way to go about protecting certain assets that you have against cyber attacks. And as part of this, I also have a YouTube channel where I'm working on extending the educational aspect of this game to kind of help give information on how to apply these specific game elements in their personal life. So it's a mix of having something that's fun to play, that's mildly educational. There's not a ton of education in the game itself, but it's when you take those concepts and break them down and teach them in another way, I think really helps solidify that learning.
All right, that was another insightful response, Lee. So you have been doing this for quite a while, for 16 years. So what's a surprising insight you've uncovered about human behavior that you didn't expect when you started? Something that made you rethink your whole approach.
Yeah, I think when I first started, I wanted to get into the offensive security area. I thought it was the cool, sexy thing to do to try to hack into systems and try to find the vulnerabilities. And then when I found out that or learned how to do that with people, how to exploit human weaknesses, not for evil purposes, but to help educate, I really found a love of recognizing, helping people learn how to uh, defeat these types of attacks. And I think just seeing how much people lose, especially the elderly and other folks, it's really I don't know. It's made me even more committed. Less to do on the offensive attack side, but really more on the awareness and educational front. Just how much is needed out there to help people be aware and to be able to stop this stuff from happening as often as it does. And so I think more than anything, it's that I got tired of seeing it happen to so many people that I care about, that I wanted to try harder to reach.
Okay, so for an engineer or a developer listening in our audience, Lee, who who is building systems that humans will interact with, what should they understand about how stress and cognitive load affect security? Where should they be designing for human limitation instead of against it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, the stress and cognitive load that a lot of times, I think systems need to have like I mentioned with the employers, just being more understanding and able to recognize that we're going to make mistakes. And I think that's part of it. And the designers, I mean, the apps and software are stress test, and you have user experience testing to try to work out the kinks and flaws. However, end users are they're going to make mistakes. And so whatever can be done to help make those mistakes, those errors gracefully received and flexible, I think that could go a long ways to, because I think oftentimes in the technical realm, we interact so much with computers, we tend to forget that people aren't machines. And so it's learning to have patience, to understand, and to really, I think, reach out and to talk with the people that will be using those apps and understanding what their stress points are and being able to work around them. And so I think that's an important way, again, to bring that human aspect into what they're doing.
All right, all right. So let's talk about social engineering, Lee. So, what's a social engineering tactic that still works ridiculously well even after all these years of awareness training, and why does it keep working in your opinion?
Yeah. So social engineering, I really like the definition that it's getting somebody to do something that may or may not be in their best interest. And this can be scammers and con artists, or it could be doctors and police officers. You can use it for good or for ill. And one thing that is hard for people to get around is authority. When a social engineer plays an authority card saying that they are from some agency or organization, it can automatically kind of put that a little bit of fear in the person that they're talking to get them to do it. There have been plenty of psychological experiments that have happened over the time. Some may be familiar with one where somebody dressed in a lab coat was telling people to cause electric shocks to shock another person. And because the person was wearing a lab coat and had a clipboard and said that they needed to do this, the person often complied. So it's, again, going back to that mindfulness and awareness. It can be tricky in those types of circumstances because you're not sure what that authority figure could impose on you. But that is one that still works really well.
Okay, so Lee, part of the theme of this podcast is centered around innovation, and for that reason, I'd like to have a little discussion about the topic innovation for every conversation we have here on this podcast. So, for you, after 16 years watching humans interact with security systems, what does true innovation in cybersecurity mean to you now?
It's a good question. True innovation in cybersecurity, especially with AI coming up, and I think that's just making it all the more serious and important that we figure out where to go from here. And teaching people, I think I'm not sure how innovative it is, but it's definitely evolving cybersecurity into a new way, is helping people realize that it's going to become more and more difficult, if not impossible, to detect fraudulent emails or videos or voice, given the surprising ramp up of artificial intelligence. And so it kind of all goes back to kind of going back to our roots. So it's all maybe the opposite of innovation, or maybe it's just dusting off what's there, but just recognizing and again understanding our cognitive limits and recognizing how we can be more in tune and recognize when we feel that something is off, that is something that's important to recognize our humanity, the way our bodies work in order to recognize when threats are coming, because that's honestly what we have the best to work with, is recognizing that and pausing, learning to verify um, those types of threats through an external source. But yeah, anyways, I think that's sort of the next step that's going to need to take some big focus on to improve awareness.
All right, that is indeed a fresh and interesting perspective to see the meaning of innovation from Lee. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. So, lastly, for our listeners, whether security professionals, leaders, or just anyone trying to stay safer online, where is the best place for them to connect with you and follow your work?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and that's where I'm starting to post some more content there. I also volunteer with the Innocent Lives Foundation, where we work to help protect children from online predators, and we post a lot of content there to educate parents and families on keeping their families safe.
All right, I'll also be sure to add your LinkedIn profile linked in the show notes of this podcast so that listeners can easily go contact or connect with you there. So it's been a truly insightful conversation with you here today, Lee, and I am excited having you as a guest on the show.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it as well.